Sega brings you major fun and games like R-Type, 8 levels of action, 8 monsters to destroy. Goldbelly is a wild adventure in the Valley of Doom, and coming soon, Roston, where you're a barbarian bounty hunter. Each sold separately only from Sega. Major fun and games.
The Sega Master System, also known as the Sega Mark III in Japan, was a third-generation 8-bit home video game console manufactured by Sega. From the time this console was released in September of 1986 here in the United States, till the time that it was discontinued around 1992, this console had sold 2 million units. Which, as much as that sounds for a console of the 1980s, it is actually very far away from Nintendo's 34 million consoles. Due to its low sales numbers and anti-competitive practices from Nintendo, you may have never heard of the Sega Master System until after its console's lifecycle was over here in the United States. And as I would later learn, that is a big shame, because this console is very capable and has a lot of good titles to choose from, even though they weren't able to port a lot of third-party titles due to Nintendo locking any third-party developer of their system from making ports of games on game consoles that were in direct competition with the Nintendo Entertainment System. That means that Sega was forced to take matters into their own hands and develop many games for the system by themselves. I first laid eyes on a Sega Master System at a video game store up near Chicago, Illinois, back in 2017. In fact, if you look at the very first video for Player One Start, you will see that I have an attempt at reviewing the Sega Master System, but what it really comes down to is my initial impression of the console. Getting to know the system after 4 years and expanding my game library has been very fun, and I think the biggest appeal to me is the fact that I can play games that were designed with the limitations of the games that I grew up playing, but these are brand new experiences to me because I have never played most of these games before. And now that I've had 4 years to collect for this system and play many great games on here, I think it's time to do a 10 essential games list for the Sega Master System. Just a reminder before we get started, this is not a ranked list, and that it has to fit a specific set of criteria I lay out in my 10 essential games for the Atari 2600. I'm going to showcase good games, but they may not be the best, and if the game is considered a hidden gem or otherwise rare, it will be way too expensive for me to recommend as essential. So basically this list will be 10 games that I think every Sega Master System owner should have in their collection. And if you follow me on my various social media accounts, I did pose the question, what are 10 games that you all feel are essential for the Sega Master System, and I did take your input into account when formulating my list. With that said, let's go ahead and load up the first game, and let's get started. A game I find myself constantly recommending to people who have never played a Master System before is Psycho Fox. I don't really feel like it's one of the greatest platformers ever made, but I think it's one that is instantly identifiable on the Sega Master System, being that back in the day this is the only platform it was released on. In this game you take control of Psycho Fox in a side-scrolling standard game. Psycho Fox must get from the left-hand side of the screen to the right-hand side of the screen with many enemies in the way. He can use a Shinto stick to change into other characters or animals, either into a hippopotamus, monkey, or tiger, each of which has its own special ability. The hippopotamus is slow and can't jump very high, but can punch through special destructible blocks in the game world. The monkey can jump higher than the other creatures, and the tiger can run faster than everyone else. Psycho Fox also has an ally named Birdfly, who can be used as armor or as a boomerang. Birdfly also allows the player to take an additional hit without losing a life. When this game was released, it got mostly positive review from critics, with one game publication praising its addictiveness and good quality graphics, while another gave it about 3.5 out of 5 stars, noting that it was fairly lengthy, and the players have the choice between 2 routes in each level, but was very critical of the game's basic actions being very repetitious. I did agree with the controls being a little frustrating at times, but overall I would definitely recommend this game as an essential for your collection. A game character that I would consider to be a mascot of the Sega Master System would be Alex Kidd. This character was designed by Sega to be a rival to Nintendo's Mario. With his first entry, Alex Kidd in Miracle World, being released on November 1st, 1986 in Japan, and December 1986 here in the United States, this game really should have had the same impact, if not a greater one, than Super Mario Bros. Did on the Nintendo Entertainment System. Obviously, the big appeal of this game are the bright and colorful graphics that were lacking on the Nintendo Entertainment System at the time. Games like Super Mario Bros. And The Legend of Zelda would have been out at this point, but their color palettes left a lot to be desired, at least for me personally. Here, the Master System shines through with its advanced color palettes, and pretty good and addictive gameplay, to be honest. In this game, you must navigate Alex through 17 stages, in which you will face off against many monsters, and the 3 henchmen of Janken. You are given a punching ability, which can be used to destroy enemies and break blocks in order to access new paths, and collect items such as money, which can then be used to purchase other items, including vehicles and motorbikes, as well as helicopters. At the end of many of the stages, Alex plays Janken Pon, or rock, paper, scissors, with one of Janken's henchmen. Throughout the stages, Alex can die in one hit, or by losing a game of rock, paper, scissors. As with most games up until 1986, the game has no save system. But if you hold the directional pad up while pressing the 2 button 8 times at a game over screen, the player will restart the same level with 3 new lives at the cost of 400 of the game's in-game currency. As Sega saw this as its flagship product and franchise, they decided to eventually build it into versions of the Master System, as well as the Master System 2. However, by the time the Sega Genesis came along, they would come up with a new mascot, one that they hoped would appeal to an older generation of kids. This franchise lay dormant for many years, but this game was eventually remade into Alex Kidd in Miracle World DX, released just this year on June 22nd of 2021. But to tell you the truth, ever since I got my first Master System in 2017, this is a game that I see as classic and iconic, and I would definitely recommend a copy for each person who owns a Sega Master System. Those of you that have been following my channel for a while will probably not be surprised that I would definitely recommend a copy of R-Type with your Master System. If I had owned a Master System back in the day, this would have been a game I would have touted over my friends as why the Master System was superior to their Nintendo Entertainment System. At a time when Nintendo was the third-party exclusive title king, it is amazing to me that R-Type is one of the few games on the Master System that never made an appearance on the Nintendo Entertainment System. Although this game does suffer from some slowdown and definitely flickering of enemy characters, the Master System port offers an incredibly faithful reproduction of the arcade game's graphics and many on-screen projectiles. I believe that R-Type not only has an appeal to the people who love those classic Japanese side-scrolling shooters of back in the day, but I also believe that this game could be a good introduction for someone who's never played a game like this before. Yes, this game is tough as nails, but it is so rewarding when you're finally able to make it through each level. Many game publications touted that this was one of the best games to own for the system, and I believe that is an opinion that is still upheld to this day. While there are other ports of this game that are also very well done, I think you can't go wrong with this port on the Master System, and definitely recommend it as an essential for your collection. Wonder Boy 3: The Dragon's Trap, also known as Monster World 2 in Japan, is a platforming action-adventure video game that was developed as part of Sega's Wonder Boy series. This game takes place after the events of Wonder Boy in Monsterland, in which Wonder Boy has been cursed by the Mecha Dragon and must locate the Salamander Cross to lift it. Although this game is a side-scrolling platformer, it's one of those few that are non-linear, and features varying landscapes in which players must navigate and find their way through. Players find items and clues needed to access different parts of Monsterland, and they can transform into other forms and gain different abilities. This game has received wide critical acclaim from gaming magazines and gamers alike upon its release. It is praised for its colorful and cartoon-like graphics, rich sound, and diverse sound effects, as well as varied and addictive gameplay. Since its release, Wonder Boy 3: The Dragon's Trap has been regarded as the best in the series by many. It won Electronic Gaming Monthly's Best Game of the Year award for the Master System in 1989. And I have to tell you, this game is often a treat for me to come back to on the Sega Master System. And I think most of that is due to the non-linear nature of this game, where I really find myself wanting to explore every nook and cranny of every corner of the game screen, wondering which clue will lead me to progress. I've also played this game on the TurboGrafx-16, where it got a name change simply called Dragon's Curse, and although I enjoyed on that system as well, I would definitely recommend this as an essential for your Master System. Now, if you were like me and you guys had no idea about the Master System until you actually owned one, you may not be expecting a variety of game experiences from different genres on this system. Most of the games I played for this system are really games of the time. Side-scrolling platformers were on fire, and there are definitely a lot of them on here that you can play. But Phantasy Star is one that definitely sucked me in the first time I played it as a role-playing game experience on the Sega Master System. Before Final Fantasy would break through on the NES in 1990, Phantasy Star was released on the Master System, and this would have been the quintessential role-playing game experience of the 1980s. Well, I'll add the caveat that this is on consoles. Up until this time, if you had played RPGs on PCs, you were getting a far superior experience to anything that was offered on consoles. That is, until Phantasy Star. Being one of the earliest JRPGs for consoles, Phantasy Star tells the story of Alice on her journey to defeat the evil ruler of her star system, after her brother dies at his hands. She travels between planets, gathering a party of fighters, and collecting the items she needs to avenge her brother's death and return peace to the star system. The game features some of the traditional JRPG elements, such as random encounters and experience points. All of the characters have predefined personalities and abilities, which was a unique element compared to the customizable characters of other JRPGs of the era. Sega designed Phantasy Star to compete and be superior to other RPGs of the time, such as Dragon Quest. One of the unique features they added to this game to make it stand apart from other traditional JRPGs were things like 3D dungeon crawling, a female protagonist, and more game animations. You can definitely tell that the game programmers put a lot of time and attention to make the game as beautifully constructed as it is. The game definitely holds its own when compared to other RPGs that were available around its time, such as Zelda and Final Fantasy. Had I had a Master System back in the day, I would have been blown away with this title, especially because it wasn't just another medieval fantasy RPG game. It had a lot of science fiction elements, which definitely appealed to me more as a kid than the medieval fantasy setting did. The only downside to collecting this title is the fact that it's going to cost you more than it will for other titles. This is one of the few games that actually had a battery save system for its cartridge. But as a result, it was one of the more expensive titles to buy even back in the day, so there aren't as many copies of this game floating around as other titles, and I think that's driven the price up on this one a bit more. Still, if you're looking for an RPG experience, I think this is the quintessential title to own for your Sega Master System. Now you'll have to bear with me on the pronunciation, but I believe it's pronounced Govelius, also known as Govelius Valley of Doom on the Western markets. Turns out to be a very fun action-based RPG, as opposed to the game we looked at earlier, which was turn-based. When I look at what other people have said about this game in the past, I see a lot of people compare it to The Legend of Zelda, and a lot of them simply dismiss it as a Legend of Zelda clone. And in some ways, I do agree with that opinion. However, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. Like a lot of games for the Sega Master System, this game does take inspiration from some of its competitors, and kind of changes it to make it unique so that their product is just as enjoyable as some of the others. But as I said, as you play this game, it's mostly similar to Zelda 2, where you have an overworld viewed from above and a series of dungeons or areas that are played as a platform game. While in the platforming areas, the player can only face in one direction and attack enemies ahead of them. Because this game uses a password system rather than a battery-backed game save, I think this game was a bit more available, and that's why the price on this one is a bit lower than Phantasy Star. But to be quite honest, I enjoyed this game as much as Phantasy Star, but for different reasons. If you're looking for a Zelda-like experience on the Sega Master System, this is the quintessential game to own, and I would definitely recommend it as an essential for your Master System. When it comes to racing games, there are a variety you can collect on the Sega Master System, but the one that I think stands out the most is probably Road Rash. When you compare modern racing games to those of the past, you can definitely see how far game graphics have come, and it's easy to forget how much gaming graphics pushed the hardware to its limits even back in the day. Taking a look at every other racing game that is on the platform, I don't think anything comes close to their port of Road Rash. And while I don't think that the graphics hold up well today to compete against modern racing games, I think that its addictive gameplay does. I remember playing Road Rash as a kid on the Sega Genesis many times with my brother, and we always took delight in being able to pick up weapons and knock each other off each other's bikes. And while I view this game as essential, this is also a game that I should mention was only available in PAL regions. So why am I recommending that people in the United States get this game for their console? Well, this is the first time I can address that the Sega Master System is a region-free system, meaning you can take games that you import from other regions, plug them into your Master System, and they should run. And that is why I decided to import a copy myself. Being a fan of this game just on any system, and seeing how well it plays on the Master System, I would definitely recommend it as essential. And speaking of imports, I would definitely recommend importing Land of Illusion starring Mickey Mouse as well. One of the things that I mentioned in my Ultimate Sega Master System review is the fact that the system was way more popular in places like Europe and Brazil than in the United States and even Japan. So what that means for us is, sadly, a lot of the great games that were released were not released here in the United States. And if you're limiting your collecting to only games that were released in North America, you may be missing out on some great titles like this one. Now, I may have the nostalgia goggles on, but I gotta tell you, seeing these classic Sega and Disney collaborations of the past really just fills my heart with a warm feeling. Playing these games back in the day was a particular treat, and even though I haven't played this particular title, I still got taken back to the days of my childhood by popping this into my Master System as an adult. The aesthetic art style, the tight gameplay controls, and platforming situations and puzzles, all provide an enjoyable gaming experience, I think, at any age level, but this game will probably appeal mostly to children even still to this day. If I had kids that I wanted to expose to the Sega Master System, this would be the one I would start with, and because it can be enjoyed across many generations of people, I would definitely recommend this as an essential for your Master System. Next up on my list, I would include Fantasy Zone 2, The Tears of Opa Opa. And while I don't think you can go wrong with any Fantasy Zone game, I think that this one is just a smidge better than the original. And while some people may be turned away from its cutesy graphics, making it look like more of a kid's game than it really is, I think that this game stands out amongst all the other side-scrolling shooters of this era for the fact that you can go back and forth, kind of like in a Defender style of game. In this game, you play as a ship that has to defeat each zone, which contains several bases that serve as your primary targets. Not present in the first game are the new warps that are hidden behind certain bases that allow the enemy to travel between different zones. Each level has at least 3 zones, and when all the bases have been cleared, in all of the zones of a level, the player can travel through a warp to the boss. Boss battles are a bit more limited in the fact that you can only shoot in one direction, and you can't move freely back and forth like in the other stages, but the boss stages are actually pretty fun and can be challenging. The only thing I will say, if you find yourself making it to the final stage, I really didn't like the boss rush that you have to do, where you have to actually defeat every single previous boss before fighting the final boss. My opinion is, if you beat him once, you shouldn't have to beat him again in the same game. But anyway, you do have 2 different types of attacks. There's fire and bomb. Fire shoots horizontally, like in a typical shooter, and you can upgrade or purchase different variants of the weapon inside of the shop. Bomb attacks are more powerful, but they only drop downward. Again, you can purchase additional variants of the bomb attack, but they are available in limited quantity. This game has been regarded as one of the best in the series, and the fact that it departs from typical side-scrolling shooters with bright colors and its back-and-forth gameplay, I think that this should be an essential that everyone should at least try on the Sega Master System. And before I reveal my last pick for the 10 essential games for your Sega Master System, I should remind you that there are some games I'm not including on this list that are actually very good, but they do not meet my criteria for one reason or another. A lot of games could be if they're a hidden gem and their price is way too high to collect. I don't really see them as essential for collecting, so they were offloaded on this list. Another example is games that included an accessory that can only be played on a CRT, as I don't think a CRT is essential to own, so I didn't include games like Operation Wolf, which I feel is much better when played with the Sega Light Phaser. I also didn't include games that require the 3D glasses, although I really feel that the 3D on the Sega Master System is stellar and top-notch, and when you combine it with games that require the Light Phaser, that is a neat experience, but not an essential experience to have if you own a Master System. Other games were left off simply because I limited myself to 10 games and no more. So if there's some that I've missed in this list and you really feel like I need to add it, please let me know in the comments below after I reveal the final game in my list. Did you really expect a 10 essential games list for a Sega console to not include a Sonic the Hedgehog game? You know, something this brings to the forefront is the fact that the Sega Master System had a very long-lived life cycle, to the point to where when the Sega Genesis was taking off in the United States, the Sega Master System still had a loyal following in other parts of the world. Therefore, a lot of games that were started on the Sega Genesis also got ports for the Sega Master System. And that's partially because if they ported a game to the Sega Game Gear, its code would also run on the Master System. True, they would have to adjust the graphics to fill up the entire screen, as there was a bit of a screen crunch on the Sega Game Gear, but for the most part this is the same game that would come out on the Game Gear. However, for those of you expecting this to be a port of the 16-bit Sega Genesis game, You will also be pleasantly surprised that this is an entirely unique adventure. All the levels and game mechanics are changed to run in an 8-bit environment, and that not only meant changing the graphics and sound, but also changing the game mechanics to something that would run better on the aging system. The premise and story of the game is identical to the 16-bit game, as Sonic the Hedgehog must race through levels to rescue imprisoned animals that Dr. Robotnik plans to turn into robots. The game plays similarly as well, as Sonic has to collect rings while avoiding obstacles, but the pacing you will notice is slightly slower, and the 8-bit version focuses a bit more on exploration. Some of the music tracks from the original 16-bit title are also ported over, such as Green Hill Zone. However, there are also some original arrangements as well. Some game publications at the time praised Sonic the Hedgehog for its level variety, visuals, gameplay, and audio, many of them going so far as to say that it compared very favorably to its 16-bit counterpart. Where I've seen criticism come in is the fact that this game has a very low difficulty and a short length. And while that was something to be expected on the Game Gear, as that thing ate through batteries like it was breathing air, they expected more out of a full-fledged console title. This game did spawn a myriad of 8-bit Sonic sequels for the Game Gear and the Master System, and although I believe any of them would be great for your collection, I would consider the first to be essential. I will always prefer the 16-bit over the 8-bit versions, but it's kind of neat to see how Sonic would have ran as an 8-bit game, and instead of seeing someone today port it back as a homebrew title into an 8-bit console, it is incredibly satisfying, to me at least, to see that Sega had already done it way back in the day. So that is my list of 10 games that I would consider essential for every Sega Master System owner to have. Out of all the lists I've done so far, this one was very difficult to narrow down, as there are a lot of great titles that I really feel people should experience on this console, but I only limited myself to 10 titles. As such, I look forward to seeing your comments below, seeing what titles I missed, and if I were to complete a part 2 to this video, what games would you say I can't miss again? And if you crave even more Sega Master System content, I will leave a link to my Ultimate Sega Master System review video in the description below, as well as a link to the 8-Bit War, where I have the Sega Master System face off against the Nintendo Entertainment System and the Atari 7800 to see which one was better. On your way out, I please ask that you leave this video a thumbs up if you liked it. Also, don't forget to click on that subscribe button so you can be notified when I make future posts. As always, I want to thank you all so much for watching, and I will see you all in the next video. If you like this video and you'd like to help out with future projects on this channel, please consider supporting me on Patreon. Also, if you enjoy the content of this channel, please remember to click on this subscribe button. Again, I want to thank you so much for watching. I'll see you next time.